everybody. It's Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we are going to continue our discussion on mindfulness on the ChangeGrid. And specifically, we'd like to put energy into how we make this something that's practical when working with a client. And so what I mean by that is that certainly one of the things that you can do at the center of the ChangeGrid is you can develop a very strong competency around meditation, a really strong practice around meditation. But I'm not a meditation trainer, so there's nothing I can really do to help anyone there. Some of you on the call certainly have a lot more experience with meditation and learning about meditation as a practice. So, we could talk a little bit about it, but bottom line is that you have to be specially trained if you really want to work with a client on helping them develop their meditation skills beyond the most superficial sorts of things we might do. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's not, and even when I look at mindfulness, although the more I look at mindfulness, the more things mindfulness seems to mean, depending on whose definition you're using. But everyone seems to acknowledge that there is a therapeutic application for mindfulness. And there is a structure around how mindfulness is used as a therapeutic technique. I'm not trained in whatever those therapeutic techniques might be. I'm not trained to help you utilize mindfulness as a useful state. I'll believe a lot of you on the call are far better equipped to help someone work with mindfulness. Um, Instead, I just know about consulting the Oracle. I'll be ready to contribute as things unfold a bit. So, all right. So, any thoughts, any questions anyone wants to throw out before we get into the little sketch I put together for today?
I haven't seen that term spelled mindfulness
Mhm.
until you did it, and now I'm seeing it all over the place. And
Oh,
so,
really? Yeah.
yes,
No, I
that's
just thought I was making a clever spelling mistake that I hoped put a different frame around what happens in your head. So
I'm
what
on
do
this newsletter from a Dr. Rick Hansen. He's a clinical psychologist with neuroscience training. I think he's at Berkeley now, but that's his newsletter is mindfulness,
oh,
and
interesting.
I didn't even notice it until like I said to you mentioned it.
And do you know why he chose that particular spelling? So what's the message he's trying to get across?
He wrote a book, um, The Buddha's Brain, and
Oh,
it's the practical neuroscience of happiness, love, and wisdom. So his whole thing is all about that idea of um, mind body connection and that kind of stuff.
hmm hmm
It's very interesting. I read the book, but not completely.
It's interesting because I really could if you said, "Hey, T, give us 5 minutes worth of content around the word mindfulness." I could throw something together rather spontaneously, but that doesn't mean it's legit. But I could certainly say that part of the problem with clients that we work with or with people in general is that their minds are too full of lots of extraneous sorts of things, things that are on their list of things to do today, other people's messaging. So, what they're hearing on the news, what they're hearing from friends, on and on and on. And at a certain point, it makes your mind full. And so, mindfulness could actually end up being a problem. Just like if you eat too much and your belly is too full, you can't function all that well. Maybe when your mind is too full, you can also suffer in terms of functioning. And maybe mindfulness is actually a message to everyone that periodically you need to be able to empty the mind, cleanse the mind, quiet the mind. So if mindfulness leads to mindfulness, leads to whatever else it could lead to, I could certainly build a whole rationale around that as a brand. So
Yeah, I actually like that analogy because if you think about it, like your belly is full. When we eat to where we're that full, digestion and how your body and particularly digest the food is the most important part. So like that's 60% of the digestion process. So it
Hmm.
takes up a lot of energy, in other words.
Yes.
So I imagine that with your mind is full of all this stuff, your attention is compromised, all these other kinds of things, that you're burning energy in the most misappropriated way.
Mm-hmm, hmm, hmm. And what else happens when our minds are too full?
Oh, certainly. You're more susceptible to the amygdala hijacking state, like the reaction. In other words, as opposed to responding. So, in other words, you limit your choice, because if you look at the research on procrastination, they say
Hmm.
that doesn't start with people who are lazy. It starts with them being overwhelmed.
Mm. Hmm, hmm. Tell us more.
So when they're overwhelmed, they have too many choices. Then it's no different than suffering from the shiny object syndrome. You
Hmm.
this thing looks good, maybe, but this thing looks really good, maybe, but this thing looks good, and you just create this loop, this cycle, and so you're never really actualizing anything, never put anything into action. So people
Hmm.
assume that with that motion that you're taking action, but that's different.
Let me share something else in my own personal experience and tell me if this would go back to mindfulness. Um, in my experience, each person does not have a single finite capacity in their mind. And once that specific or individual specific capacity is exceeded, then mindfulness is triggered and all the negative stuff comes along with that. I know from my own personal experience that a lot of it could also be very much circumstantial or contextual. And I'll give you two quick examples of that. When I first wake up in the morning, I need to wake up quietly and slowly. I don't understand, can't relate in any way, shape, or form to people who wake up to the radio blaring music or the news, or and suddenly they need to turn on the TV and they need all this. It's like that overwhelms my mind so much that all I really want to do is escape. I actually feel like I need to flee from that. Similarly, if I've gone to yoga and after yoga, I'm in a bit of a dazed state, which, is what I'm paying for, I guess. So the drive home, that should be a transition. For me, when I walk back in the door of the house, I'm still in that very Zen mellow sort of state. And so if I'm suddenly asked a bunch of questions or things need attention or there's people around or whatever, I feel very overwhelmed very quickly. And
Mhm.
so I'm giving that out there just as two quick examples that are intended as questions. Does our mind's capacity to hold stuff change based on circumstances? Is there any neuroscience to all that? So we'll throw that to Brian.
Yeah, we have different thresholds based on things that we condition ourselves for, and this is, it's no different than your habits. So you have these habitual pathways that become kind of this neurosynaptically connected, very strong, and that's what you'll often snap back to in terms of hysteresis, right? So we kind of co-create these internal environments, and we don't even realize it. This is why all these unconscious things, and if you don't bring them to light in terms of recognizing the value or the lack thereof that they're actually creating, then you become complicit in your own kind of dysfunction over time. Because if you think about it, all these things that in terms of like peacefulness, a person will say, well, yeah, I need to travel to X part of the world to get peaceful. And they get there and they're not peaceful,
Right.
or anything can just disrupt them quite quickly. So this in neuroscience and priming is something that I use every night,
Mhm.
where you give your brain, you kind of feed it when it's getting into a deep sleep condition. or preparing for sleep. And I read that in Einstein's autobiography. And it's not necessarily to look for the answer as it is to really start that connection of neuroplasticity, which develops in deep rest relaxation. So the recovery part is key. So just like you don't build muscle when you go to the gym, it builds in recovery. So some of this stuff, we have to prime it, and then we have to keep that pattern going through rest and relaxation and through our habits and these kinds of things. Therein, all hell literally can be breaking loose around you, and you can still have peace.
Right. Well, in fact, I think that's what Kathy was talking about very advanced stages of meditation or advanced skill sets in meditation that, um, although if you're in a true threat situation, you'll
Oh yeah,
respond accordingly. But given any other set of circumstances, it's amazing what you can tolerate. Um, so, and I've always wondered if is that related to personality? What's that really related to? Like, for example, I can't, when I was in college, I knew that I couldn't study in the dorm room because I would always hear somebody's radio going or I'd hear people having conversations in the next room or whatever. I literally had to go to the library and not just go to the library. I had to find a place that people didn't even know existed. I have to have absolute silence in order for me to really focus and get something done. And I always thought of myself having a learning disability because I can't, uh, what do I say? I can't study in a forget a chaotic environment, in even a gently noisy environment. There can't be any music on. So,
right, right.
so I always wonder, like, is that something about me? Is that a personality thing? Because I did read a bit that INT, whether you're a P or a J, doesn't matter. But if you're an INTX, in all likelihood, you need quiet around you to get things done. I don't know if any of you on the call are fluent in all things Myers-Briggs or that, but I'd be curious to know if you've
Yeah,
studied
yeah,
anything.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure other people are. I know Myers-Briggs really well because I'm an ENTP. So I'm friends. I know a lot of INTs. What you were triggering with me though was, I mean, there is something called there's a book out and an author whose name I can't recall, but it's called Highly Sensitive People. And I realize that I am a highly sensitive person because I absorb the energy of the environment around me. So I have to be extremely careful about where I am and what I'm doing in certain environments. And I think that T, you may be the same way. Um, and it has less to do with your Myers. I mean, I think that certainly Myers-Briggs has something to do with it, but there's an incredible sensitivity to energy, and it sounds like T, that's part of what you're dealing with, uh, and and so that can influence, your patterns. I'm the same way. I can't wake up to an alarm clock. It's jolting. I can't, I have that same process. But there is this phenomenon that it might be worth just investigating, and I cannot remember the name of the author, but it's called Highly Sensitive People, and it was written about children in particular and how to understand that about a child who is that way. I don't know, Brian, or if anybody else on the call is familiar with that phenomenon, but it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
tangent. I mean, I don't mean to take us off on a
Oh,
tangent,
no,
but
no, no. This is exactly what I want to talk about. Yeah.
yeah. You're spot on with that, Kathy. That was I think her name was Elaine something. But she's talking about sensory processing, and that's why I was just saying, like these internal habits, if you will. That's what neuroscience is all about in terms of neural networks and neural patterns and associations. That's called interoception. And so interoception, this internal state is always looking for balance. And so we create these conditionings and these preferences that are linked to things that become, I call it like our own rhythm. Like Richard Carlson wrote a book called Slowing Down to the Speed of Life. When I hear consulting with your oracle, I take that as slowing down to the speed of you. That's going to be very unique. Slowing down to the speed of Brian is going to be uniquely different than slowing down to the speed of Kathy. It's going to be, uniquely different to everyone on the call. And so, because of how our neural networks are processing and taking in the sensory capacity both within us and around us, is looking for that match. And so, when I never liked crowds as much as I love sports. I never liked crowds. And I still don't today. Like, I feel very comfortable. That's why I said, and I think you said it, T, like in this pandemic, people are freaking out. Oh, I don't get to see people and do all these things. I'm like, I'm very comfortable.
Yeah, right. I'm having a good old time. Yeah.
Exactly. Like
Yeah,
party of
no,
one.
right. Well, I think one of the reasons why I find this so interesting is because it does go back to this question about what happens at the exact center of the change grid. Is it an experience that crosses all people, all personality types, all cultures? Um, and even inside of it, is it one thing, or is it really now something that is specific to the individual? So, for example, yeah, I want to wake up quietly and I want to transition gently from one state to another. But there's plenty of times when I can handle all kinds of thinking all at once and all kinds of questions coming my way and all that. So it's not like I always have to have things be so quiet or be so gentle or whatever. Sometimes I'm just fine. So I'm kind of going like, well, um, is it contextual? Is it that you just need more time to ramp up to being able to handle whatever the barrage is? What is it? Any of you have any ideas, feel free to throw it out there. That said, I did want to slide one more thing into the screen for the discussion. So let me just do this real quick. This is up on the Productive Tension website. Those of you who haven't seen this for a while, this is the little page on the merging of brilliance and the models since 1908 that have been integrated into what we know today as being the change grid or the master stream. And so, right there it is. Well, this last one I put up there, and I put it up mostly for fun, but in 2002, Hancock and Weaver published something titled Temporal Distortions Under Extreme Stress. So this is state of the science thinking. I mean, good grief, now it's 20 years old, so who knows what's come along here. But in their work, they proposed that as our level of stress increases, our perception of the passage of time becomes distorted. And as it does so, the number of things we can pay attention to is compromised, leading to load shedding.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not entirely sure how this fits in or how useful its integration would prove to be in the world of professional sales, but it does make you think, and thinking is what made tension management what it is today. So it does make sense that if something happens and suddenly you're thrown from your resting state up into stress, so from sleep to being abruptly awakened, or from being in this Zen sort of state to suddenly having to live life, if you experience that or its impact on you is that it moves you way up grid, is it any surprise that you just go like, I can only focus on one thing. I can't be hit with all this stuff all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Because the level of tension, as it goes up, the number of items you can juggle, and that's probably true physically, intellectually, emotionally, the things you can juggle
Mm-hmm.
gets reduced. So in total relaxation, oh, I don't know if this would be true. In total relaxation, when tension is at its lowest, is your capacity to juggle things at its highest? Or does it also get compromised as tension becomes too low? In which case, your optimal ability to juggle is when tension would be at a moderate place. I just made that up, so you guys comment on it. What do you think?
That's a good question. It
Yeah.
might be too low to the point where you might miss key details, is what I'm thinking. Because again, if we see the world through our five senses and we know that um, this interoception. So this neuroscience helps us to process this. If you look at people who have what I call sensory deficiencies, like they might be autistic. I have a nephew who's autistic, and he's very sensitive to his environment, but he gets in these states where he just don't care about things and he's just doing it just to get it done. They kind of miss details. And I can see that happening in that situation, which is
If
the
you're,
exact
yeah.
opposite if you like have too much. So in other words, these sensory deficits distort because it doesn't allow us, we've been talking about center the grid, about being open. Kathy talked about this higher consciousness kind of experience. That's not necessarily a forced thing, I don't think. I would love for
No.
Kathy to speak about that, but it almost seems like that's natural. And so when I see like a lot of spiritual gurus say you have to do this and do this, is all this kind of forced stuff, I think that overwhelms too.
I'd love to speak to that, Brian. I mean, one of the first things that I had to stop doing when I was really learning how to meditate was to stop reading books about meditation
Mm,
and to get out of my head and stop using my intellect around it, because it's all about tuning into how you feel.
mm,
Um, and so that's why I don't read gurus. I mean,
mhm,
they're all out there. I don't read all those books about the 10 steps of meditation and,
Yeah.
this one and
Yeah.
that one and all that stuff. Because to me, it's totally meaningless. It's not an intellectual process. It's a whole process. It's a whole person process. So you're working with different parts of your brain, and you're just basically trying to access, the part of your brain that you're not used to using. So and that only comes through breathing. Breathing is the only thing that will enable you to unlock that. Whether you're sitting and breathing, or whether you're like doing martial arts, or doing something where you're altering your state so that you're not focused on your thought. You're focused on something else. So that was one
yeah,
around that. I mean, I was thinking of different things as you were talking, but that's one thing that emerged. So that when I'm with somebody and trying to get them to the center of the grid, and this happened to me yesterday, I was coaching somebody, and they said, I'm just anxious all the time. I have monkey brain. I have so many voices telling me all the things I should do. And so I basically took them through a basic breathing exercise, but it was more about having them understand and get to a place where they could just create space to listen to themselves, which is what the Oracle is all about. How do you get to the space where where who you are can actually have space to comment,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Exactly right. Exactly right.
yeah. So the idea then, I like that because again, I'm thinking about like if we're going to truly experience optimal perceptual appraisal in any given moment, you need, the senses need you need to be in a state where unfettered access to whatever that sensory capacity is available, like unfettered access. You can't be thinking too much. You can't have too high of emotion. So it has to be just right. And breathing what is the body's ultimate reset button, right? So it puts you in that space that you talked about so you can co-create with universe and God or whatever one's higher thing is. You're open for that. You become an instrument. And I think that's often missed, that when I'm seeing what is on the screen here, we've never learned about these kinds of intangible lessons that we need to learn about the oracle of self, because everything's always designed around the external. So the real curriculum is the oracle, and opening yourself up, it seems like to me, to what's around you, but more importantly what's within you, so that you can interact in the most favorable way, because there you can make valuations and create potential value. So you're just not interested in the end product. You're more interested in the process itself. And that will be regenerative value because you'll want more of it. So that you create kind of like your own dopamine loop. You know, you start experiencing some little small wins with these balancing these sensory perceptions. Now you start, I want more of that. I know I look for that all the time, but like Kathy, I learned to, I should say I'm still learning, not to chase it. Like I think it's always available, but I find that it gets harder when I chase it. And I get a lot of books and, you know, read a lot of books a year. And people always say, yeah, this worked for me. This worked for me, you know, kind of a thing. And it probably won't work for you. So I stopped doing it.
Interesting. So, David, I see you've unmuted. Is there something you want to throw in?
Well, you know, I'm looking at this Hancock-Weaver diagram, and it all makes sense in terms of master stream because we want focus, especially during presentation and closing. And if we can't get tension high enough, there's too much going on in that prospect's mind to focus.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so I think that, you know, taking this all the way down to apathy, in apathy, think of all the things that you're surrounded by. I mean, to end up in apathy, you have to view your abilities being extremely high, the challenge very low. So you've got all kinds of competencies and mastery. You've got all this sort of stuff. None of it's particularly important to you at the moment. So even if it could be useful, you're not using it. But then, you know, to build on David's point, now you're in a sales discussion. You're not in apathy anymore. Not you as the prospect, not you as the sales representative. You're trying to now do something useful. But we as good sales professionals have to make sure tension is high enough that they can focus on an increasingly limited set of issues. So that ultimately we can get them to focus on and do whatever it is that needs to be done. Yeah, David, is that where you were going with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, can you imagine? Well, that's what we said. When tension is moderate, everyone's going shopping. Well, how much time can you spend shopping? How many options are you going to look at if you're in power? You're going to look at all of them. And, you know, no one wants to do that. I always joked, it's like as a sales representative, I want to hear the prospect say yes. If they don't say yes, I'd like to hear no, because I don't know what to do with maybe.
Right.
It just takes too much time and energy to work your way through a maybe or someday or
objection handling protocol, T.
That's it. Exactly right. Exactly right. Right.
Did you put these in the master stream book? Are these in the master stream book?
Yeah, it's a chapter. In fact, this is actually pretty much what the chapter physically looks like.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was put in as an afterthought because, you know, I don't really think this is what's important for people to know. But when they do want to go, where this idea of tension and tension flow, tension management all come from, okay, I didn't just, you know, have a lovely hallucination and there it was.
In
It's
color.
right. I mean, look, it came from a lot of little glimpses here and there of all these people who think they're unique, but lo and behold, no, not so much.
Do you have any of those books left, T?
I do not. I don't even have one of my own. I don't even own my own copy of it.
Oh, I do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the Master Stream book. I don't even own one.
I've still got a couple of tape sets.
Really? I don't even have one of those. So I've got none of my own stuff. Wow.
I have extra books if I can find them and somebody wants them. I'll look.
Really?
They're
Wow.
fabulous books.
Yeah, I don't, it goes into things too that we don't really much talk
A little
about
nerdy,
anymore,
but
yeah, it is nerdy, but yeah, listen, I'm never going to write anything that's a fun read. So I only seem to be able to create textbooks. So there you go.
I have the PDF version, but I'm wondering,
Yeah,
is
I
it
have
the same one?
No. There was the original book. It was a hardbound book. Yeah, and then we ended up with one, and I also don't own a physical copy of the second book, but we do have the electronic copies of that.
Okay.
These books.
Was there a second book?
Yeah, the first book was MasterStream: How to Predict and Control the Responses of Your Existing and Prospective Customers. A rather aggressive title, but that's exactly what we taught people how to do. And then years later, we were producing a audio tape program called Pay Attention Attention. And because I scripted out the entire thing, I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and take all those scripts and let's see if we can edit this into more of a book form. And that's what we did. So the second book is actually a reworking of the
Oh,
scripts for the tape program.
okay. So I have the second book then, because I think that's all the scripts, and it's hardcover, and it's still in good state. I'm also a
Oh,
nerd.
well, that's great. Yeah, no, there you have it. I'm perfectly happy to have my electronic version of it. That's not, yeah. So, but
It's
isn't that
all
strange?
electronic version, T.
What's that?
Could you send us all an electronic version?
Oh, yeah. It's in fact, it's up on the website somewhere.
Oh, all
I
right.
just have to figure out where, but it would be under the assets for MasterStream, and
And
you
we
can
all
download
have
the book.
it. I mean, we all have it. So if you've taken any of T's courses, it's part of the course.
Yeah, it's all a link to the book or whatever, so it would be there. But if you can't find it readily, David, just let me know and I'll send you a link to
Yep,
it.
you got it.
Okay, so back to this little subject here on our screen, though. This is what I kind of wanted to see if we can do something practical around. I don't know why I always feel compelled to do something practical, but I do. Um, so as we said last time around, people accidentally wander through or find themselves at the center of the change grid all the time. As you're moving around the change grid, how do you not on occasion just find yourself going through it? But there's a big difference between stumbling through it or gliding through it and actually going there to do something. So I think this is why I think it's important for us to say this doesn't happen at the center of the change grid as much as this is something that can happen at the change grid, but you're going to need to use that moment. You got to get yourself there. And now you have to say, and I'm here for a reason. So let me go ahead and do whatever it is. You guys get that distinction between just accidentally being in the center and doing it deliberately? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so now in the regular training program, we do talk about that. Well, there are these upgrid, outgrid, downgrid, ingrid maneuvers that we can deliberately do to help move someone from wherever they are on the change grid to wherever else they want to go. Hopefully you guys also understand that if I do the right combination of those maneuvers, I can end up steering somebody to the exact center. So I could just use the four cardinal sets of maneuvers to get somebody at the center of the change grid. But then I said something else in your training. Do you guys remember what I said about what is the actual PowerPoint maneuvers? Where there's not four of them. Anyone remember what I said when it came to PowerPoint maneuvers? Okay, what I said was that everybody has them, but they're unique to the individual. So all of us have things that we know that if we go out there and deliberately do them, we're going to end up in a much better place on the change grid. And so for some people, is that about doing a little bit of meditation is how they end up getting themselves to this centered spot? Is it going for a walk somewhere? Does that do it? Does taking a bubble bath? Does taking just a few deep breaths? I mean, whatever it is, we all have one, if not several things that we should know or could know that we could go and do deliberately that would move us to a more centered, peaceful, quiet sort of a spot. Can all of you guys think in your own lives of at least one or two things that you know you could go out and do whenever you felt the need to find yourself more centered? What is it that you could do? Anybody have one they want to share?
Go in the garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Lynn, it's going in the garden.
Taco Bell's
Going to
Canon in
gym.
D. I
Okay,
used to use
Edie wants to
it.
listen to Pachelbel's Canon. Indeed, that
It
moves her to her
does.
centered spot. Yeah.
I can listen to loud blues music.
Loud blues music. All right. Yeah. How many of you kind of went like, oh, that would not do it for me? Yeah, but isn't that interesting? And so that's the whole point of this. And I could ask you guys to go ahead and keep sharing. But the truth is that each one of us have our own unique set of PowerPoint maneuvers, things that we know that if we consciously go out there and do, we'll find ourselves in a more centered, peaceful, balanced kind of a place. Now, another thing that I say in that part of the training program is that it's important to have more than one because not all of them are handy. So sometimes you need to center yourself, and I'm sorry, but there's just no way you can go for a walk. You got to do this in the next 2 minutes, and you got to do this without physically moving. So it's nice to have some PowerPoint maneuvers that are just very portable and are things that you can do without having to pull into play any kind of tools, any sorts of resources, whatever it is. It's just something that you can easily do. So hopefully you guys have not only your more external action oriented or activity oriented PowerPoint maneuvers, but you also have some that are very portable, very privately deployable, if you will. You can do it and no one even knows you're doing it. And that'll move to the center. So you guys with me on that? Do you have both types of PowerPoint maneuvers in your
Yes.
yeah, okay. And so
Yes.
that's where we're going. Now we take that a step further in the training program. And I say, not only is it important for you to know your PowerPoint maneuvers, it's important for you to know the PowerPoint maneuvers of the other people in your life. So if you've got kids, you've got other family members, you've got friends, you've got coworkers, employees as the case may be, if they are having an out of balance period, an out of balance day, it's very important that you can help them tap into their own PowerPoint maneuvers to move them to a better spot. So, we can come up with all kinds of examples of how this becomes practical, but I had an employee who we did very large events for one of our clients. These would be events that were several days long and would have maybe 20 to 30,000 people in attendance. And so there was a big show going on and we had to keep the show to what we called a cue to cue. Every single minute we knew exactly what should be happening on stage. And so we always knew, where are we on the cue to cue? Where are we on this kind of thing? Well, this particular gal uh, was helping people finalize their PowerPoint presentations, get them ready so they could go up on stage and do their little bit. And these people who were about to present were notorious for wanting to change things at the very last minute, which would send this poor graphics gal into absolute upgrade panic mode. And so I learned early on how to get her back to a good state because she'd always rise to the occasion. She'd do whatever has to be done. The show must go on. That's our responsibility. And so as soon as that was over and done with, I would simply hand her the cell phone, and on the cell phone waiting for her would be her daughter. All
Mm.
she had to do was talk to her daughter because, these shows were on the road. And so she's away from her kids and all that kind of stuff. She just needed to hear her daughter for, a couple of minutes and she was back to the center, ready to tackle the world. So I think it's very important that we all know the PowerPoint maneuvers of everyone who's around us and that we care about, obviously, so that we can help them and in the process help ourselves along the way. So similarly, I think we should know our clients' PowerPoint maneuvers so we can get them to a centered spot. Thoughts about that?
I love that.
Anyone? Yeah, and what are your
Yeah, see,
PowerPoint?
I have a client that was a CPA and now is president of the company, and he is only comfortable in detail.
Mm-hmm.
To make him come to establish rapport with him, you have to give him a 3-paragraph email with about 30 points in it.
Wow.
And then he responds. But if you just send him an email and said, "How you doing?"
You wouldn't know what to do with that.
He deletes it.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's kind of like, are there certain things that everyone would have in common? I think that certainly Kathy will probably agree with this, and I've heard Brian talk about it. I've heard Joseph or Dragon talk about it as well. Breathing is going to always moderate whatever it is you're experiencing tension wise. Sometimes it'll raise your productive tension, sometimes it'll lower it. It'll move you around, just the act of breathing. Maybe that's one that everybody shares in common across all cultures and all situations. The idea about reducing sensory input channels. Maybe everyone becomes a little bit more centered when they close their eyes and turn off their ears for, a couple of minutes. Just reduce the noise and maybe, just maybe, you'll find yourself in a more centered place. So I do believe there are probably some things that are universal, but I believe that the most powerful PowerPoint maneuvers are going to be the ones that are unique to the individual. Thoughts about that? Comments about that?
Agree.
Yeah, it's also part of conditioning. If you think about that, Linda didn't just stumble across a garden and go like, "Oh, I feel so centered." No, over the course of a lifetime of gardening, she has made this connection with the garden as being a place of restoration for her. So I think that's another thing is like these part of the reasons why they're centering is because we have a history with whatever that behavior is or that situation is that we now associate peace with. So for example, I'm not a particularly religious person, but I don't know how anybody can travel around the world and go into any of these kind of sacred temples. I don't care what religion they're attached to, but go to a place that has that kind of sacred sort of presence about it, that energy around it, and not have it affect them. So it might be a totally different religion in a totally different country, but the vibe could very well still be found there for you, the one that you would associate with whatever brought you to that I don't know, that sacred holy sort of spot. Okay, thoughts about that? All right, so let's see what we can do to make this into a practical kind of a thing. Now, obviously, I'm very interested in the oracle of the self and how we can help more people develop the ability to access their oracle and to use the oracle powerfully to help them make better quality decisions and do whatever it is they really needed in their life. And so last time around, we talked about how we got to get ourselves to a certain point of readiness before we can go and do any of the different kinds of work that we might want to do when we're at that centered spot. And last time around, I said, maybe the reason why you're accessing that state is because you really want to develop your meditation. You really want to find that quietness, that inner peace, and everything beneficial comes along from that. Maybe that's your goal. Maybe your goal is mindfulness as a therapeutic sort of an approach. Maybe your goal is to get clarity around specific issues that are happening in your life. Those are three very different things you could do, of perhaps 3 dozen things you could do once you get to the center of the change grid. So at some point, there's a choice that's being made. And that choice is, which path am I going to go down now? So not every time that I go to the center of the change grid do I have to pursue the oracle. Not every time I go to the change grid do I have to find that higher plane of existence. I have many routes available to me anytime I want, but they all seem to start in the same place. And we talked about this before. You can listen to the recording for the detail around it, but we need to find our space. There needs to be an environment that for whatever reason works best for us. Then it's almost always going to be the breath. Let's start doing some deliberate, conscientious sort of breathing, rates, patterns, whatever. Then what do we do about reducing sensory input? Try to do whatever we can do to eliminate distractions that are eliminatable. Then we, kind of check in with the body. Are we relaxed? Am I physically ready? We talked all about this before, targeted relaxation, that kind of stuff. And that may be all you really want to do. It's like, just for a moment, I just want to zone out, zen out, whatever you want to do. And maybe you've just done it. And what happens beyond it isn't really why you're there. You just wanted to relax. Now, if you decide you want to now, from that relaxed state, go and do some work when it comes to developing your meditative capabilities. I could ask Kathy right now, put you a little bit on the spot. Um, when you get to that point, Kathy, you're at this road now, so you're relaxed, you're ready, everything's been prepared. Is there a thought you have about, and now I'm going to do my early stage deliberate meditative work? Are there certain things you do early on? So
Um,
you're at this relaxed state. You're ready to go.
I mean, as a coach or as a person?
Well, as a person, because now it's like, again, I kind of envision we've all walked the same road to this place of relaxed readiness. And now one of the roads says meditation, go left. So what happens when I go left on the meditative path? What for you, what kind of happens next? It says, all right, I'm relaxed. Now I'm going to meditate.
Um,
Or is
that's
that how it works? It's like,
no, not well. I mean, I guess it does. I guess it is. It's just not as linear now for me. So, but yes, I mean, I think the breathing, the positioning, the breathing, the intention gets you to a place where you are relaxed and you are ready. And then what I usually do is some kind of visualization exercise using light and breath. And so it's really bringing in light. I mean, this is the spiritual piece of it. I meditate with light. And so I visualize light, and light is essentially, if you are focusing on light, you're basically, it's light versus fear. So light will just basically remove fear. If you just allow yourself to tune into it. And so that's what I do. And then I go to, that brings me to a higher consciousness. I will often just bring it all the way through my body, very slowly, work it through, and until I get to the point where I'm not really conscious of my body anymore, where I am just allowing myself to experience whatever comes to me at that moment. I mean, there are different ways to do that. I mean, there are a lot of different things you can do in that state. You can be very intentional and ask for certain things. You can just say, help me understand something. You can just say, just let me feel, you know. You can say, I use different colors of light, blue light for healing, just let me heal, you know. So there are lots of things you can do, but you can get experiences and answers in that space. So for me, it's the difference then becomes, it becomes true meditation when I start using light.
all right. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering because another way that I know people will now go into their meditation or enter their meditation practices through mantras. And so repeating these phrases over and over again, or a sound, will move them into it. So there's something though that I was just wanted to explore about, that says I'm at this crossroads. If I go down the meditative path, what happens next? And as you've pointed out, that could be different for different people. There's lots of different things.
Right, but in that process, there is a repetitive kind of hypnotic mode, that the way that you phrase things and the way that you talk through your breathing process becomes mantra-like. And mantra meaning not always the same thing, but the notion is that it's sort of it has a rhythm.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say. There is a rhythm attached to it that I'm sure Brian can explain this from a neuroscience perspective, but it's enabling a rhythm to come into your body and your mind and your spirit that allows you to go to another place.
That's right. And other practices might include something like drumming. Will do it, or those of you that are on the call that are martial artists, maybe there is a certain thing that you do that says, now I am on that path. Maybe it's, I don't know, you know,
The
whatever it
breath
is.
is one that I was taught. So
Right,
in
but
other words,
the breath happened in the preparatory stage.
right, but that's
So
when so like you breathing just in the preparatory stage and breathing for an attack or a kick or use of your like in Muay Thai you use a lot of knees, so that's different because you're breathing through the movement.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so once you get you prepare for that state, now you have to continue it. So when I heard Kathy was speaking, I said, oh, okay, perhaps these are reinforcers, right? So it kind of backs up what that opportunity could actually be. And now you're moving into, I call it for myself, or bringing it to life state, where now you're actually practicing something. And the more you continue to do that, and so that's why I said before I see the invitation or the moment that you're talking about as an invitation and an opportunity for further expansion.
Mm-hmm. Well, and building on what Kathy said last time around, the whole time we're doing these more advanced sorts of things, as we've chosen which path we're going down, we're going to continue to do all these things that are in the basics
Mm-hmm.
anyway. We're always going to be paying attention to our breathing. We're always going to be surveying our body and relaxing and all those good sorts of things that we talked about. So it is very much additive, as we're doing that. Now we just have a few minutes left, so I just want to just say that there are other directions we can go when we're standing at this crossroads, and it's great, and I'm more than open to exploring as many of them as you guys might want to specifically. But this idea about consulting the oracle, I think that is a very different utilization of the state,
Mm-hmm.
because the reason why I'm consulting the oracle is because there is a reason why I'm consulting the oracle. I go
Mm-hmm.
down that path because there's something very deliberate happening, and that whatever it is going to be in the category of better understanding a situation, coming up with options for that situation. It's almost like it's a decision-making process that's going to be, um, what do I say, the real structure of what the oracle, the self, is all about. I mean, it's you talking to you about you. It's not you just shooting the breeze with you about you. um, you guys with me on this? It's more issue focused. Am I
Yeah.
babbling?
Would you say like you reach a threshold of some sort?
Well, I think your goal is by the end of your experience consult with Oracle, you are reaching a threshold. You're making a decision. You feel more ready to follow through and then get that. Oh, Joseph is sharing, if you guys are watching your chat, that's what
Yeah.
Thomas Edison did, sleep and then get the answer. I do that. How many of
Mm-hmm.
you ever visited Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan?
Yeah.
Ed,
Anybody? Yeah, yeah. Well, everyone who says yes happens to have been born and raised in Michigan. But Greenfield Village
It's
is
worth the
the
trip.
yeah, well worth a trip. It's a collection that Henry Ford put together, and what he did was he went all around the world, and any building that he thought was of great significance, he bought the building and had it methodically dismantled, shipped, and reassembled in Greenfield Village.
Edison's lab.
Edison's entire Menlo Park compound is there. Every building in the right spot, everything that was in the building in the exact location it was supposed to be. And so it's not,
Wow.
nothing about it is a replica. Nothing is replicated. It is all the real deal. And Thomas Edison and Henry Ford were very close friends. And on the, I guess it would probably have been like the 50th anniversary of the light bulb, um, Henry Ford invited Thomas Edison to come to Greenfield Village, and he entered his laboratory, and everything that he needed to make another light bulb was exactly where he would have left it, where it was going to be, and he made another light bulb for that. So it really is. So you learn a lot about Thomas Edison and the fact that not only did he not sleep like normal people sleep, he was a what do I say, a serial napper. Rather than sleeping X number of hours per night, no, that's not he. He was only a napper. And so he would wake up from his nap. The other thing that the main laboratory has there is a small pipe organ. So he would also go and play the organ, and that would do that. But he would come up with whatever answer he was looking from after one of these little naps, or after sitting there and playing the organ for a while. So, but just so you know, if you want a reason to go to Greenfield Village, it's not just one or two buildings. There are hundreds of buildings that he collected. Among them, the Wright brothers bicycle shop was one of them. The Heinz family's homestead. What are some of the other
Lincoln's
ones?
cabin,
What's that?
the cabin that Lincoln taught in or
Oh
went to
yeah, yeah.
school in.
The school that Lincoln taught in, all that sort of thing. It is all there. It's all there. So it's its
Wow.
little slogan back in the day was "Where American history comes to life."
Come to Michigan.
That sounds interesting. I'd love to visit
It
that.
is, and physically adjacent to Greenfield Village is the Henry Ford Museum. The museum would take at least a whole day, if not multiple days, to work your way through. It's basically a museum of technology. And so, and inside of this, just so you can get an idea about the scale of it, he has a collection of, I think it's 8 locomotive engines. The full engines are right there. So you've got these giant trains inside of this building where he's showing the evolution of that. In in the Henry Ford Museum's collection, he also has the chair that Lincoln was sitting in when he was shot, and the car that John F. Kennedy was riding in when he was shot. These are other. Oh, he
Wow.
also doesn't he also have Lindbergh's plane, or no? Couldn't do whatever.
I don't remember that.
There's an airplane.
I mean, you could go there and spend 2 days in the village and 2 days in the museum, and it's amazing.
It really, really, really is. And if you are going to go there, I know I'm turning this into a travel log, you want to stay at the Dearborn Inn. So the Dearborn Inn, I think, is now a Marriott property, but all the rooms are like Greenfield Village.
I think it's
So
in closure, T.
is it really? What
think
a
it is.
shame.
Yeah. Oh, wait, not the Dearborn Inn. I was thinking of the Hyatt Regency.
Oh,
the
yeah. Well,
Dearborn Inn is much better.
yeah. The Hyatt Regency, there was a mall out there
Yeah.
connected to the, yeah. That would needed some help to
Yeah,
begin
but the
with.
Dearborn Inn is it's got a
Yeah,
great-
very classic, very historic. You kind of feel like you're going back in time when you stay there.
Yep.
But it would be part, if you wanted to go and have the Greenfield Village experience, that's where you would end up wanting to try to stay as well. But absolutely a wonderful, wonderful place. And as anyone who was born and raised in Detroit, I promise you, you went to the Greenfield Village and you went to Henry Ford Museum as school trips most years. So yeah, it was
Wow.
part of
That's
it.
fascinating.
It really is. It's exceptionally well done. It's kind of like the Smithsonian Institute of the Midwest, but you just have to always keep in mind everything in the village and everything in the museum is the personal possession of Henry Ford. And
Hmm.
so it's his personal collection. I mean, by now I'm sure it's owned by a foundation or whatever, family took over, but originally that's how it all started. He collected these things.
It's like
So
walking through history.
it very much is. So if you want to ever see the evolution of the
Poster.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. You know, curling irons. It's there. I'm
The
telling you.
the evolution of the washing machine.
Yep, washing machine, toasters, you name it. It's all there. It's all there. And yeah.
I'll offer that if anybody wants to come to Michigan, that I'll meet them.
Yay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's a wonderful, wonderful area. And particularly inside of Greenfield Village, it's not only all these historical homes, historical places of business, obviously Edison's entire Menlo Park compound, but there's also all these industrial buildings. So you all can also see how lumber mills evolved in time. It really is a remarkable, remarkable place.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah. It's very well maintained. I mean, you're gonna pay some sweet money to buy 4 days worth of tickets, let me tell you, but money well spent, an
Or you're
experience
gonna
well worth
see
having.
stuff you'll never see in your life.
It's just true. It's just true. And it's right outside of Detroit. You just fly into Detroit. Dearborn is where the Ford Motor Company actually had its
20 minutes.
foundations. So yeah. Oh, and now the that whole area of Dearborn has an extremely large population of Middle Eastern people,
Yeah.
which means the restaurants and the bakeries are phenomenal. So
Wow.
right along Michigan Avenue, oh my gosh, if you like Middle Eastern food, if you like Middle Eastern pastries, yeah,
Mhm.
you
How
will
about
not
Greek,
starve.
how about Greektown, David? Is that still going strong?
No, Greektown is still going strong. They're developing the riverfront. Dan Gilbert is building on the old historic Hudson site, the second tallest tower in the state.
Really?
And there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in
Yeah,
and
yeah.
around the city.
Yeah, now we will tell you guys, if you're going to go to Detroit, I can't believe we've all just become travel ambassadors for Detroit. Detroit, Detroit is a fascinating place to visit. So
Yeah.
if you like historic homes, all the Auto Barons mansions are available for tour. Downtown Detroit has got all kinds of cool things going on
Well,
in it.
and I'll let you know that my stepson owns the Detroit Bus Company and does tours around the city to religious institutions or historical institutions or for architecture, or he does a thing called the Drunks of Antiquity, and he shows you the oldest bars in the city.
That's sweet. That's absolutely
Oh,
sweet.
good. I want to
Well,
do that. I'm going to go in July. I'm going to do that.
that's now,
The bus company.
the last thing I'll tell you guys, though, is that if you are ever going to do a trip to Detroit, make sure you have your passport with you, because you can go right across the bridge and you're in Canada now, and there's a lot of interesting things to go and explore over there as well. But nowadays you have to have a passport to cross over that border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Caesars has a heck of a casino in Windsor.
Right. Yep. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thanks everybody for joining in. We'll talk again on Tuesday. We have more to go over for the Oracle, so we'll continue this dialogue. Thanks everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.